Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session of our first open source webinar here at SmartBear called Show and Tell. We will kick it off at the 3rd minute, so we'll give everybody a couple minutes to trickle in. But in the meantime, you guys can put in the chat where you guys are all watching from this morning. I am in Somerville, Massachusetts, so it is 10:01 right now.
I'm in Edinburgh in Scotland, so it is 1 minute past 3 in the afternoon for me.
And where are you, Saf?
Hey everyone, I'm based in Leeds, so same time zone as Joe, but across the border in England.
Awesome. So if you guys want to pop it in the chat, where are you from? I see a lot of people are still trickling in, and we will kick it off at the 3rd minute on the hour. So we'll just give everybody 1 more minute to trickle in. And in the meantime, if you want to drop in the chat where you're watching from and the time, I mentioned I'm in Somerville, Joe is in Edinburgh, and Saf is in the UK, Leeds. Hello, Alex. Hello, Chad. Awesome. 4 p.m. in Poland. We'll give everybody 1 more minute. I know I sound like a broken clock. Welcome, everyone. I'm seeing the chat lighting up. I love that. Okay, ready to kick off. So good morning from Somerville, Massachusetts. My name is Jessie Etting. I am one of the product marketing managers from SmartBear, and with me today is Joe Lang. Joe heads up our open source community as manager, and she sits on the DevRel team. And then we have Youssef Nabi, and he is one of our developer advocates here at SmartBear. And just some housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be for 1 hour. And then if you are watching, you will receive a recording. It'll also be live on YouTube after for, you don't have to sign in or anything to watch it. And we'll shoot you a follow-up email to rate your experiences. Also, we'll be having a couple of poll questions as we go through the webinar. So that is it for some housekeeping rules. All right, so what is developer relations here at SmartBear? So we are a small but mighty team. I call myself a developer relation advocate, but it is made up of Franco Commons. He is the API technical evangelist here at SmartBear. Joe Lang, as I mentioned, she manages all of our awesome communities. And Saf Nabi, he's a developer advocate for Pact, one of the many enterprise tools that we have. And he's also the community shepherd at Pact, which is another open source tool that we have. So their mission is to inspire, engage, support, and equip a vibrant ecosystem of developers to build the next generation of technology. This means emphasizing with what they're trying to do, facilitating their success, and advocating for their needs by being the interface between these communities and SmartBear's product, engineering, and marketing teams. So they're small, but they do a lot. So let's talk a little bit about our open source tools here at SmartBear. So we have a lot of tools. Swagger editor that you guys might be familiar with, Swagger UI, Swagger CodeGen, SoapUI, and Pact. And we recently acquired Stoplight. And with Stoplight, we have Elements, Prism, and Spectral. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about our open source tools?
Yeah, sure. Okay, where do you want to begin? Shall we start with the communities?
Yeah, let's talk about our communities. Do
Sure, I
you,
can
how do
tell you.
you and the DevRel team work across all of these groups?
It's quite a challenge. We're always busy. Our time does flick between priorities and also if there are events going on with our communities. So there's definitely some places that we spend more time than others. For example, the Pact community has been really active. It's a thriving little place. So we're busy in there, but we do try to keep our eyes over everything where we
Yeah,
can.
that's so awesome. You sound very busy. I know you are. Are there any interesting overlaps between these communities?
Yeah, it's been really sort of warming as a community manager who used to just look after one community. The thing that stood out to me is that people aren't just using one tool in isolation. Their tools generally part of a wider strategy, and it encompasses multiple tools. And so we see the same names popping up in different communities. And we often find that if we hold community meetups or groups or events, that our guests also know each other and have met at testing conferences or such like. So it still feels like quite a small sector or industry sometimes. And yeah, there's definite overlaps with the communities that we are part of anyway.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Did I go ahead? Saf, is this you?
No, but I can pick up this slide. So we just showed, or Jesse just showed the suite of kind of open source tools that we have within the SmartBear family. And I'm going to talk to you today about how specifications can help drive your API lifecycle and how, in particular, you can use some of these SmartBear open source tools in your SDLC. So one of the benefits of having API specifications is the ability to drive various different aspects of your SDLC. So some of the most common API specifications today are OpenAPI, which is predominantly for HTTP and REST-based services, and then Async API, which is targeted at event-based architecture and message-based systems. By leveraging these API specifications, you can drive different aspects. So people may talk about API design first, so you could design your idea of the product you're building and then use OpenAPI or Async API to describe those APIs. You can then potentially use mocking tools to do quick prototyping and provide kind of working endpoints that clients can consume. You can also drive things like clients with generated libraries. You can generate really rich documentation. You can drive various testing phases, and you can actually bootstrap parts of your implementation to drive your development. So we'll be taking a look today with some demos at a few of these different phases. So we'll be looking at design with the Swagger toolset and some of the stoplight tools. We'll be looking at some of the tools available for documentation. We'll be taking a look at stoplight and Pact for mocking, and we'll be looking at SoapUI for our testing phase. We'll be looking at SoapUI for some functional testing of our API. And we'll be looking at the Pact toolset for contract testing.
Awesome. Thank you, Saf. So more about our open source communities. So this is our Swagger community. It seems so busy. Joe, do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's busy. You can see by the numbers of stars on the screenshots there I took of the repos, the kind of 4 busiest repos that Swagger are active in. Super busy. The Swagger engineers, we have a team of engineers that work on the open source product here at SmartBear. They're always busy in the community, in the GitHub pages, and also in the SmartBear forum. They're active answering questions and providing support there. We hope to give a lot more focus to Swagger in 2024, and it's part of our mission as a DevRel team to try and bring this group together. There's a lot of super helpful people in the group that we could bring together, as we have done with other communities. So there's going to be a lot of action on Swagger in 2024.
Sounds awesome. And what about Pact? Can you tell us how to connect with the Pact community and how active it is?
Yeah, sure. So Pact is, yeah, it's a thriving little place. It's there's about 5,500 active members in our Slack group. So we have a free plan with Slack. We use an open source tool called linen.dev to archive our Slack so that all the juicy goodness of the time that people have taken to help with solutions and things are all searchable on Google, and we don't lose that effort that people have put into the community to help others. We also have a good group of maintainers, and we have a regular community meeting every Wednesday. It flips between sort of a European time zone and an Australian time zone because the Pact core team are in Melbourne in Australia. So Yousaf and I take it turnabout to attend those meetings, and we meet with the maintainers. We talk about any problems or issues that they have had with updates or providing support for others, and we plan things. We get together every so often, and we're trying to provide that community with more of a voice to showcase some of the work that they've done with the Pact tool. So yeah, it's a busy little place. They also have a really cool GitHub existence. They've got lots of repos in GitHub and quite helpful front pages there. So it's also a good place to go to connect with us.
And what about the newsletter?
Oh, yes, of course. So there's the Pact Post. It comes out every month. I think it alternates between Pact Flow, which is the enterprise product, and then between the open source product Pact. Yousaf does a lovely blog every month as well, which features in the post and also on the Pact website.
Yeah, sounds so awesome. You guys have a lot going on in Pact.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us about SoapUI and our recently acquired tool, Stoplight?
Okay, so SoapUI, most people might know on this call, it's kind of in maintenance, keep the lights on mode. We do patches and security updates where they're needed. I believe there have been 2 releases done by engineers in SmartBear this year. Jessie, do you have a mailing list for
I
Soap?
do. Yes, we have a very vibrant mailing list for SoapUI, and we do quarterly newsletters, just keeping you guys what's updated in the open source community. We share things from Pact, we share things from Swagger, we share thought leadership and just the regular API lifecycle community that we all know and love. So we do our best.
There's also the SmartBear forum again for SoapUI users. We do try to keep an eye on that page in the SmartBear forum. So it's another place that people can reach us.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And what about Stoplight?
Stoplight. So we're just learning about Stoplight because they've just joined us. Shaping up. We've got lots to learn before we look at any kind of strategies as to do. They have active GitHub repos and looks very tidy, and it's all going good in there. So I don't know too much about their setup as it is right now, but we hope to have another focus for that in 2024. And yeah, lots to learn there, I think.
With that, what's coming in 2024?
Well, I think for us, it's about connecting people and giving them a voice and showcasing work that they've done. I think that's important for us for the year ahead. We want to do community spotlights and fireside chats and more of these type of open source tool focused webinars, which we think our people want. So lots of that. Linking groups together where it makes sense. This is the perfect example again of the four or 5 different communities all coming together for one thing, and also hearing from the community on what they want from us. What can we do? What can we provide them with? There's a lot of listening to be done next year as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Jo.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Saf, over to you.
Hello, do you want to stop sharing your screen and I can start sharing my demo? So thank you very much for that, team. So hello, everyone. I'm Yousaf Nabi. I'm a developer advocate here at SmartBear, working in the developer relations team. I joined, I think last year in around March or April as part of the Pact acquisition into SmartBear. But I'd previously been working in the in open source tools, specifically the kind of Pact and Cypress projects. And I got really kind of friendly through the Pact Slack group that Joe was talking about, and met the kind of founders and creators of Pact, and kind of added loads of kind of features and stuff to it, and fixes, kind of was generally a bit helpful. And through that, I managed to get a job kind of working and advocating both for kind of SmartBear's commercial customers, but also really getting paid to play with open source tools and technologies. So I'm really pleased today to be able to show you a bit about some of our tools and technologies. So we've got a repository. I'm going to stick a link in our chat. So I've got a demo repository, which is this in GitHub in SmartBear-DevRel GitHub organization, and the repository is called OpenStack. And it's essentially a makefile with various commands in it, and it's going to help us facilitate and bootstrap various parts of our SDLC driven from an open API description of an API. So we mentioned before that an API description that can adhere to a API specification, such as Open API or Async API, can provide inputs for multiple aspects of our SDLC. So we're going to start with design, and we'll kind of work our way around today and introduce various tools in order to tackle various problems that you might face. So some of you may have only used one of our SmartBear tools, open source tools. Some of you may have used them without knowing that SmartBear or some of our engineers are behind those tools, or you might be using other open source tools. I believe at some point a poll will pop up asking if you've used any of our SmartBear open source tools, and if you've used more than one, that you'll, as you'll see in this demo, we'd love to hear from you. And if you've seen a multitude, if you've used a multitude of these tools in your day-to-day work, we'd definitely love to hear from you, and we can probably reward you with some swag if we can talk about it. So this particular repository, you can grab it on your machine, you can clone the repository, or you can just grab the make file from there. So I've already got this on my machine, and there's a make file in here, as I mentioned earlier. And our make file has a little command called make help. And then there you can see the various options that are available to you. But we'll go through this in a bit of a story-based fashion, so you can see how we can design an API from kind of nothing, and then take that through into development. So the first thing we're going to need for our example is an open API description that describes the thing we're going to build. So for our example, we're going to use a products API. So we mentioned earlier, I'm part of the Pact developer advocate for Pact. And in our examples, we build all of our examples in multiple different languages based around a product catalog system. We use this example both for HTTP and our message-based examples in order to show the interoperability of our services. So what we're going to be building in the end is a product catalog website, and this catalog product catalog website is going to consume a basic product API, and this product API will follow a HTTP interface. We've got a generic product schema, and that mandates that some of these fields are optional and some are required, and also specifies the type for each of these properties in our response object. We've also got a set of endpoints and the responses that we expect to get from them. So you might be familiar with these kind of expectations for your product that you're going to deliver, maybe being loosely written down in a Confluence page, or maybe in an email, and it can be difficult to version them to work out which is the source of truth, and it can be hard to drive kind of any additional kind of workflows directly from kind of arbitrary content that may be stored in different forms. So in our particular example, we've pre-prepared a OpenAPI file, and our OpenAPI file, we can look at it in our terminal. So we'll just cat it out to our terminal here, or we can look at it in our editor. Now, in this editor, it's stored in something called YAML, and it can be somewhat difficult for users to read or work with, especially if you're new to Swagger or the OpenAPI ecosystem. So there's some tools out there that can be used to help you, and one of the ones that users might be quite familiar with is something called the Swagger editor. So this is going to allow us to kind of author and edit and create an OpenAPI description very easily. So we'll just take a look at the Swagger editor. So this is an open source tool that's created by the SmartBear's team, and there's a hosted version available at editor.swagger.io that you can visit and use for free. What some people don't know is that the code base is open source and available on GitHub, and you can actually run this locally on your own machine, and you can self-host it. It comes with a variety of features, and on the slides earlier, we mentioned that there were 3 main Swagger open source tools. So one of them is the Swagger editor, which we can see here. So we've got a view on our left-hand side, which is YAML, which is the same API that we see in the right-hand side in our editor. But on the right-hand side, we see the second of our Swagger tools, which is Swagger UI. So this is providing a real-time view, a kind of human consumable view of our API. And as we update our API on the left, we can see the Swagger UI update on the right-hand side. If we remove particular fields from our API, we get some basic validation telling us that in order to adhere to the OpenAPI specification 3.03, as we have here, we need the required property version. Swagger UI also has some nice features in being able to neatly describe each of the different operations described in the API description on the left. And it also provides the ability to see more detail of each individual API operation and see the example values. So potentially the example parameters you might send in a put or patch request, or the example response schema that you might expect to get back. There's also the ability in Swagger UI to connect it with a real URL so that you can try out these requests in the comfort of your browser, so that consumers can begin to explore your API without having to have implemented anything. The third tool that was mentioned was Swagger CodeGen. So that allows us the ability to leverage our OpenAPI description that we've created and bootstrap our development by generating either server implementation templates or bootstraps and client SDKs available in a number of languages. So you can modify each of these templates, or you can create your own if you're working with a language that a template is unavailable. We'll show in our example, we'll modify our TypeScript fetch project, and we'll incorporate Pact in the Pact JavaScript flavor, and we'll use that to demonstrate that functionality. We also showed in our kind of SDLC that's driven by API descriptions, not only open API, but we showed async API. So there's a button here that says try our new editor. So if we click on that, we'll see something that is referred to at the moment as Swagger Editor Next. So this is the next evolution of the Swagger editor. So the Swagger editor was rebuilt from the ground up in order to leverage some new technologies and to be built from its heart, to be designed to be multi-protocol. So we know that many practitioners now are not just working in HTTP-based environments, but they're also working with event-based systems. So predominantly the new Swagger editor can support async API. So if you visit editor-next.swagger.io, you'll be presented with the Streetlights Kafka API. If you go to file load example, you can see Open API is supported as well as async API. Some of you who may be familiar with the Open API specification know that Open API 3.1 was recently introduced with support for JSON schema 2012, I believe, and the new Swagger editor supports Open API 3.1.0, and you'll see some more posts at the start of next year about the Open API workflow spec that's being introduced soon as well. Some of the additional stuff in the background, this is being powered by something called API DOM, which is another Swagger open source project, which was being designed to kind of break API descriptions down to AST, abstract syntax tree. And by doing so, we hope to be able to build adapters to be able to build them up into the kind of a new world vision of our code gen. So the ability to build things in new languages for clients or servers, but also be able to apply kind of semantic rules to the things that we are generating, so we can build best practices into your Java APIs that make sense where they might not make sense in a kind of implementation in another language. There's going to be loads of other kind of announcements around API DOM, but you can go to it today at the GitHub Swagger-API organization and check out the API DOM repo in there. So these two versions of the Swagger editor are actually hosted, but we mentioned before that they're able to run on your local machine. So if we take a look at our README, we've got some instructions on how to run these locally. So both the Swagger editor and Swagger editor Next are available on Docker Hub. So we're going to pull down the Swagger editor container or image from Docker Hub, and then we're going to load in our Open API spec. So with any luck, this should be running in the background, and we should be able to view our Swagger editor. And we have our product API loaded in here, and we can get all that good feedback that we're able to in the hosted version. We can also potentially modify the code base behind it if we wished, and run that locally. So we don't just have to pull their image from Docker Hub. So the Swagger editor, running the old Swagger editor locally is cool, but as we mentioned, the Swagger editor next is coming out. Hopefully around February, the existing Swagger editor will transition to a legacy status. So you probably want to check out the Swagger editor next. So that's also available on Docker Hub and uses the tag next v5. If you check out the GitHub Swagger editor repo, there's all the information on there to check out how to run it either locally or through Docker. So again, you can see when we first load it up, we get our Streetlights Kafka API. One thing to note that differs from the original Swagger editor is we had the ability to preload our Open API in here or our async API file, because we could pass it in with an envar. However, the new Swagger editor doesn't support passing in envars at creation. We can get around that because we can select file and import file, where we can import our Open API description, and we can see it here, and we can start editing it as before. So just one thing to note, when our validation errors, they don't appear in the top right as they did in Swagger UI, but they appear down in the bottom left. So we should always have version. This particular code 502.0601 is referring to the code in API DOM. So all of our kind of rendering and rules engine now is being dealt with by Open and with API DOM, and we'll move into a tool for standardization and governance later in our demo, and hopefully we'll be able later see a kind of tighter integration with that and Swagger editor in the future. So once we've described our Open API and we've kind of agreed maybe with our various parties, we might want to provide a view of our Open API. And we mentioned before that we've got the ability to do these try out operations. We might want to provide a view of this Open API, but without the ability to edit it. So not only does Swagger API provide the Swagger editor, but we provide the GitHub repo for Swagger UI, which is also open source. And it's actually this open source component that is both embedded in the Swagger editor and the Swagger editor next. That again follows the I will come back to running that locally, but we'll just talk about design. So when we're in our design, we mentioned there's some linting capabilities. So we had in our Swagger editor, if we removed the version, we get some basic validation to tell us here that our Open API should always have a version. So there's lots of various reasons why there are additional potential this particular validation errors that we are getting here is telling us that our Open API description does not match the Open API specification, and therefore it's not a valid OAS 3.0 document. There are subtleties above and beyond just an Open API, a valid Open API description that you might want to apply for your organization. Oh. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. So not only whilst we're designing these APIs, it might be the case that you're not only designing one API in your organization, but actually you are overseeing multiple teams generating multiple APIs. And it would be prudent for us to ensure, potentially as API architects or just as developers, that the APIs that we're designing are secure, consistent, and useful. And if you're working at an organization at scale, it would be nice to be able to provide kind of rich feedback to your developers at the point that they are editing their APIs. So one of the kind of awesome open source tools that is out there that is able to do that is a tool called Stoplight Spectral. So this is just one of the 3 open source tools that Stoplight provide. And as we go through this demo and use each of those Stoplight tools, it should hopefully become quite apparent why acquiring Stoplight Spectral was quite integral to the API delivery story at SmartBear, both in our commercial aspect, but our open source. So Stoplight Spectral provides an API kind of style guide, enforcer, and linter. So you might be familiar with linters in your development kind of experience, providing semantic rules to your development code. Now, there are particular rules that you might want to build into your open API descriptions to ensure that they provide kind of either security governance with things like OWASP, or you just kind of, you can use rule sets for things like the format of your URLs and the operations that are performed within the URLs, just so you maybe provide or conform to industry best standards. By providing these this feedback really early, it can remove that kind of human conflict you can get if you're telling someone after the fact they've developed something, or maybe during review time. So these we mentioned before that those open API documents are quite permissive and vague, and the standard rule set doesn't provide enough meaning for your organization. So we'll take a look at one of the how we can leverage Stoplight Spectral in our tool set. So first of all, we need a rule set. So Spectral is just a generic YAML or JSON linter. So we mentioned the analogy with our development kind of linters for our coding standards. If you're working in JavaScript, there might be different types of rule sets you can use for Prettier. So different code styles, and depending on the organization, there's different code styles that are adhered to. Stoplight Spectral is no different. There are a suite of different rule sets. So we mentioned before, there's an OWASP one, there's URL style guidelines, but there's also many different companies who've actually elected to not only improve their APIs internally, but to share that knowledge with others. So you can see some big names here. So I'd implore you guys to go and take a look at the github.com stoplight.io GitHub organization, and this particular repo is called Spectral. We're just going to look at a really basic rule set today. So the Stoplight team provide a basic generic rule set for Open API and Async API. So we're just going to store those in a YAML file, and then we'll run a Docker image from Docker Hub, and in our Docker image we will pass in we'll mount a volume with our Open API file, and we'll also mount in our rule set. So here we can see some errors that have been emitted from Spectral. So it's telling us that 3 of our examples are missing a required property, and we've got a couple of warnings here around some missing attributes. So we've got operations tags and info contact. We can actually take this command for Docker, and we can provide a different command, and we can provide here's a file that I fixed earlier. So if we run this command again, we should be able to see that these results will come back as a pass because no results were found with a severity of error. It's completely configurable, the rules that you use and the whether you fail on a warning or error. This is just being run with a Docker image, but it can be run with, say, GitHub Actions or a CLI or a binary, so that you can easily plug it into any CI/CD system you've got. So I'm just going to revert those changes on our file, so that we can see that these changes are going to be shown in other tools later in our example. So now that we've got our open API definition authored, and we're able to ensure that it conforms to various standards, we can share it with other users. So this is our documentation phase, and there's 2 tools in the SmartBear arsenal now. So there is the Swagger UI view on this left-hand side. What we'll do is we will start that with Docker while I'm talking. So this is another image from Docker Hub, which we can view locally. And this provides just a non-editable view of the Open API. There's also, as part of the acquirement of Stoplight, there is a secondary tool now in our suite. So some of you may be familiar with it, and it's called Stoplight Elements. There are multiple ways of running both Swagger UI and Stoplight Elements. They're both highly customizable. In our particular instance, we have a HTML file. We will be using a script file or a script tag to pull in our Stoplight Webs component, and then we're going to just pass a URL to our hosted Open API description. And if we take a look at that in our browser, we can see a slightly different kind of rendering of our Open API description. So we can see our operations here are split by 200 or 400, so they're kind of operation codes, and we can see our body and our response example. Depending on your examples or styles that you're using, you can also add in the try it out editor, and you can get different code samples in different languages as well. I don't have a strong preference over one or the other. There are multiple different reasons why you might choose one or the other, but there's links in this documentation to both repositories. You can check out the code bases because they're both open source, so feel free to have a look and see which one suits you. Again, if you're using any other open source tools to kind of do your Open API documentation, we'd love to hear about them. So one other thing we mentioned in the Swagger UI and Swagger editor was this ability to try it out. However, we would need a server URL, so a hosted version of this API to be able to make this request to, in order to fulfill this try it out functionality. So at this moment in time, we actually haven't done any provider development. So we may wish to, as well as providing the kind of Swagger UI or the UI representation of our API, and providing the YAML representation or JSON representation of the actual API file. Some users might just prefer to explore that API through their, favorite HTTP client, or begin to they might do some kind of POC development, and they want that real API to be there. Now, there's ways that we can kind of cheat a little bit, and it's almost like by prototyping your API. So a familiar term for this might be mocking, and this ability for mocking will, in our example, allow us to take our Open API definition and the operations that are contained within it, and provide a faux working API that essentially we can hit, and it serves responses that are defined within our example, within our open API description. So for example, in this open API description, we have a request, a get request on the path product, and it will return, if it's a valid request, a response of 200 with an example payload. So Stoplight provide their third tool, which is Prism. So this is another open source tool, HTTP mock server, and this allows us to emulate the API's behavior. There's lots of different reasons. So if you're working offline, you can read through these reasons here. We'll take a look at how we can spin that up. So again, we'll be using it with Docker. It's available as a binary or as an NPM tool that you can globally install. And it allows us to, all we have to do is pull down the Docker image. We tell it that we want to start up a mock. We're going to bind it to localhost, and we're going to pass in the path to the Open API definition. We can see that we've got some paths that are have been instantiated, and we can see that Prism is listening on a port. And if we make a curl request to that, we can see that we get some a response payload back. And if we prettyify it with JQ, we can see we've got an array of products that are being returned, although we only have one single product being returned within that. So now that we have a mock API that we can hit, and it represents our open API description, we could host this somewhere, and then we could store the URL within our servers block in our open API documentation. And this would allow us, or users of the either Swagger editor or the Swagger UI view, to utilize this try it out functionality and start seeing the request populated as per these examples here. So once we've actually provided that mock, or once we've had this ability to generate this provider mock, we may wish to, or we might not trust it straight away. Although it's been spun up from this open API definition, we might write tests to assert that this, we might perform some tests to assert that this mock is performing as we expect it. So I've just performed a manual test with my eyeballs. You know, I've made a request to localhost /products, and I've got the expected payload that I anticipate. Now, this is okay for now. I've got really high confidence that this is working, but it's not necessarily scalable. So we would use automated testing here, and we would specifically use functional testing, or we may wish to use functional testing. And one of the particular tools we have in our arsenal for functional testing of APIs is SoapUI. So SoapUI is a long-standing API testing product, and despite its name, it doesn't just cover the SOAP protocol, it also covers HTTP and other protocols. Today we're going to look at its capabilities for HTTP, and we're going to drive it off our open API. So we're actually going to leverage off another open source project, and this open source project is called Open API to SoapUI, and it was built by a team called the API Addicts, and the API Addicts team are pretty cool. They provide loads of best practice advice and guidance through examples, teaching, and kind of conferences around how to build really scalable APIs. So well worth a check out. But the reason we're using that is because I can kind of bootstrap a project in SoapUI manually, but we're short for time in a demo, and I'd love to be able to show how we can just generate a basic test suite that at least covers all of the operations defined in our open API. And that is exactly what this open API tool is going to do. So the first thing we need to do is retrieve the repository. So the repository is on GitHub, and we're going to build this repository locally. So if you're running locally, you will need Java. There is at the start of this repository an in-browser workshop that you can run that provides all the dependencies, and you can check that out if you need to. So this particular project, it builds with Java and then emits a Docker image. So we'll, once that Docker image is running, we then send a HTTP request to a server that's been provided by this OpenAPI SoapUI project, and we basically send a payload, which is a base64 encoded version of our OpenAPI spec, and it will return us a SoapUI project. So if we take a look at our project folder, we can see an XML file, and this is our SoapUI project. We could load that into SoapUI and run it manually. But I'm not going to do that at the moment. I want to showcase the fact that we can hook this all up in our CI/CD system. So what we're going to actually do is a twofold part. So we're going to start our mock provider with Prism. So at this moment in time, we don't actually have a real provider code base available to us. But we do have some functional tests that we could execute in SoapUI. So SoapUI provides a test runner, which is available in Docker Hub as an image, and we can run that by providing the path to the SoapUI project that we created earlier, and the endpoint of which our server is running on. In this case, it's our mock provider. So we can see here that our mock provider has got some responses that have hit it during that test run. And we can see that we have 3 test cases that have passed and none have failed. One thing to note in our terminal on the left, we have some validation errors here. And these validation errors are the same validation errors that we returned with Spectral. So Prism, as it's built by the Stoplight team, is leveraging those base rule set that it uses for Spectral within Prism. So if you're not using Spectral, you can at least get some of that feedback through some of your network traffic that hits your mock. If we don't run this mock provider on our left-hand side and we run our functional tests, we should with any luck see that our SoapUI tests are going to fail, and we'll get an exit code that is non-zero. Cool, so I'm just checking the time. We've got 7 minutes. So the next part, we can kind of, now that we've got our OpenAPI description, we provided a mock server, and we're able to provide some functional tests on our mock server. We're at a good point where we can either start developing our provider code base, or we could start developing our consumer code base. We don't necessarily need to do these at the same consecutively, like sequentially. We can do them independently, and as long as we adhere to the OpenAPI specification, we can we'll have a high degree of confidence that our systems are going to be able to integrate and talk to each other. So we're actually going to start our journey with our consumer, and we mentioned before that we have the Swagger CodeGen project. In the Swagger CodeGen project, we have the ability to generate a consumer code base from our OpenAPI description. We also mentioned that we can modify the CodeGen generators in order to build our own project. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to fetch the Swagger CodeGen generators project, and in that particular project, we have created a brand new template, and that particular template is, if I can find the right folder. We mentioned before we've got TypeScript fetch, which is the already existing project, and then we've got TypeScript fetch Pact project, which is one that I've subtly modified. I've just taken the TypeScript fetch project and copied it, and then I've added in the boilerplate of a Pact test. and all the different mustache or handlebar kind of placeholders in order to dynamically generate this file based on our open API. So that will, when we generate our project from our open API file, this will return a newly created folder called TypeScript Fetch Pact Consumer. And in there, we have an API definition. This API definition contains all the operations in our API definition. So create product, get all product, and get product by ID. Our API test spec contains a particular Pact test. So this is a consumer contract test. And in this consumer contract test, we are going to instantiate a mock provider. We're going to set up our mock provider with the expectations that we expect this client code base to make when we call a particular operation on it. So this particular operation is going to be create food. We're going to describe the particular response that our provider is expected to return. And this will allow us to run this test on our consumer side as a unit test, which will allow our consumer to get really rich feedback and have high granularity, strong level of control over the behavior of their provider during this test, which is very deterministic. That wouldn't be the case if you were testing against a real provider, and then that if it was the case in an integration test. And at this point in time, in our example, our provider code base doesn't exist. By using Pact as your choice of mock provider during your unit tests, there will be a byproduct of generating something called Pact contracts. These Pact contracts accurately contain the expectations of a consumer and provider relationship and all the interactions that occur between them. This can be shared with our provider at a later date in order to ensure that the provider can fulfill these consumer expectations. But we also mentioned that our consumer isn't available to us yet because they haven't been developed. There's another tool that was originally built by the Atlassian team, another team based over in Australia, much like the Pact team. And this allows us to take an open API document and a Pact consumer contract and validate the two. So here we're passing in an open API document in the path to the Pact file. If we just modify one of these endpoints and we run this again, we should be able to see that we get an error returned because one of the paths for post is not contained within the open API document. So we've got 1 minute left. Our last step, or there'll be two last steps, but I may not go over them. So we'll be functional testing with our provider implementation. So as part of our consumer code base using the Swagger code gen, we generated our consumer code base. In the Swagger editor, there is also the ability to generate a server. For our purposes of our demo, I've created a server outside of the Swagger code gen product to show you that you could bring your own project. And in this step 9, basically, we replace our mock provider with our real implementation. So we'll run our real implementation of our provider, and then we can run our SoapUI functional tests against it. In our last step, we will use contract testing again, but this time on our provider side. And this will take our consumer contract, and we will use the Pact framework to replay the interactions contained within this Pact file against our provider. Our provider then will return a response to the Pact framework, and the Pact will assert that the response from the provider is matches the expectations in the contract file. I think we're at time now, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to say thank you very much for everyone who has attended this webinar session. I really do appreciate it. I hope you've been able to learn or gain something from it. And please feel free to check out the repository in the future. If you have any issues, feel free to raise issues on the repository and reach out to us at any time. But yeah, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you. We'll send you a recap of the event and a link to the recording. So all the best and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.